Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. I hope you're doing good and well. So for this video, I'm going to be doing a metal subgenre tier list. I've got all the subgenres here listed at the bottom. Actually, there are more metal subgenres than this, I would say, but these are just ones that are on this particular tier list that I'm going to be rating and putting into different tiers. Everything in S tier will be my favorite subgenres, and everything in F tier will be my least favorite subgenres. Now, I will say this about subgenres. I think they're best used as guides and not as all defining categories. Whilst you do get some bands that fit quite nicely and squarely into a particular subgenre, it's actually not so much the case in modern times. You get bands that are kind of genre fluid. They can be several different subgenres, and it's hard to know which subgenre they really fit into most or which one they are most aligned with. So you get a lot of variation, and I think that's a good thing actually, so that subgenres don't become too stale. But yeah, I would say generally don't always judge a subgenre by one or two bands as well. And I think that is actually the mistake I may have made a bit in the past. Think about, give maybe a few other bands a try and see if you still don't like that subgenre. Because what I've found in my experience as my musical tastes have evolved is that they've slightly changed. And some subgenres that I listen to or I used to listen to, I no longer listen to because I've kind of gotten a bit tired of them maybe, or tired of bands that get that label. And then there are other subgenres I'm actually like, you know what? I've grown to really like this now, and I never used to, but now I kind of love it. So anyway, that's enough of me talking about subgenres per se. And let's actually get on with rating these and putting these into different tiers. So we're going to start with heavy metal, and I guess that's just classic heavy metal, right? It's think of the forefathers of metal. And yeah, I mean, this is where a lot of it began. And, to be honest, maybe it's become um, a little bit tired now, but I still think that there's just so much great heavy metal, legendary heavy metal bands that have helped to make heavy metal as good as it, to me, as good as it is. And a lot of it still sounds great now. And I don't think that'll ever change. So I feel like not putting into S tier might be a bit controversial. I suppose for me, I love it, but it's not quite maybe always doing for me what some of these other subgenres do. So I think I'm going to put it in A tier for that reason. Progressive death metal. Now, to be honest, on you've also got progressive metal on this tier list. So yeah, that kind of makes it difficult for me to a little bit difficult anyway, because I kind of think of a lot of progressive death metal bands alongside a lot of my favorite sort of progressive metal bands. I do like a lot of progressive death metal. I think that's going to go into A as well. Now death metal's on here, but we've also got brutal. There's quite a few different death metals on here actually, aren't there? Death metal for me, I'm gonna stick into. I'm not actually that big a death metal fan, which might be surprising. Just straightforward death metal. I mean, it doesn't do a huge amount for me, to be honest. I'm gonna be honest and put that one in C tier. I certainly don't dislike death metal, but I also don't think I don't find myself loving it. I think the whole kind of just constant blast beat sound for me can get a little too much quite quickly. So I tend not to have as much patience with it. But yeah, and that's why I like progressive death metal quite a bit more because yes, you do still have that sound a bit, but you have it going all over the place and being interesting and getting lots of guitar solos. So I tend to prefer progressive death metal, I think. Power metal. Now, power metal would be in a lower tier for me if I was to do this a few years ago, but quite recently I've been getting more into power metal. And I would say for me, it's the combination actually of symphonic and power metal that I really, really dig, like old school Nightwish, like Blind Guardian, Avantasia is kind of symphonic power metal, old Avantasia in particular. So I think it's grown on me quite a bit. I think I'm going to put power metal in C tier. It's still not something that is one of my favorite subgenres, but it's something I enjoy. Okay, well, thrash metal. I mean, for me, thrash metal is somewhat where this all started. My love of metal starts perhaps even before I really started to properly discover a lot of the original heavy metal pioneers. It was thrash metal that got me into things. But the problem with thrash metal is it's just not aged that well for me, or I don't know if that's quite the right way of putting it. I'm not as into it as I used to be. So I think thrash metal would be B tier now. Still pretty high. I still kind of love it. And every now and then I discover a thrash metal album and I absolutely think, wow, yeah, this is awesome. I do like the heft and the thickness of thrash. You know, something you just feel musically your ears can grab onto, and you get like that really just awesome sound that it brings with it. So yeah, I'm going to put that into B tier. Technical death metal. Um, I do really like tech death, but I do find it a bit overwhelming, and I can find with tech death records, the thing that annoys me about technical death metal is you often have to be patient with it, but you can spend 10, 15 listens with a tech death album, and if it doesn't reward you after that, you feel like you've wasted a lot of time because it's like, oh, I've spent so much time with this tech death record and I don't actually like it that much. Yet I've spent however many hours trying to get into it. And that's what I don't like about really technical death metal is that it can be a big investment of mental energy for little rewards unless the bands are genuinely great. And I think also offering something a little bit different. But I do like quite a lot of tech death as well. I think it's interesting, and tech death done well is absolutely incredible. So the talent of the musicians involved is always quite something to behold. Progressive metal now. Now this is where we go into S tier for me. Okay, so many of my favorite bands are prog metal bands. I mean, it has to be said. It has to be said. Opeth, Dream Theater, Tool, I guess, although I'm not as big a Tool fan as some people. There are just so many prog metal bands that I really enjoy. In fact, my last three albums of the year, Tesseract, Persephone, and Earton, all progressive metal bands, all getting my number one spot. So it's no coincidence. I think it's obvious for me that I have a real taste for prog metal. And so prog metal has gone right into S tier. There's just so many bands that I love from this subgenre. It feels like by now you got some great bands coming up that are newish. You know, I'm thinking of your Hakens, your Caligula's Horses at the moment that have recently been doing great albums. So it's not just it's a genre I think that's aging pretty well, and it is still producing some fantastic bands if we're gonna lump them in to that this kind of a style. And yeah, I love prog metal. I think you all knew that though. Up next, symphonic metal. How appropriate. I'm doing Symphonic Sundays at the moment. And to be honest, I tell you what, if I'd have done this even just a couple of years ago, symphonic metal probably would be in C tier or maybe even D tier. I don't know. Um, I've really been getting into it lately more and more. And I think this journey of discovery I'm on, not just with Symphonic Sundays, but with me just growing to like certain bands' discographies a bit more than I used to, and to discover this sound and see it with fresh eyes, see it or listen to it with fresh ears, maybe without sort of. I do think that I fell into the trap, a lot of people fell into the trap of, which is judging these bands a bit too much sometimes, thinking that they're all going to have that Nightwish formula and all sound exactly the same. And I think there are a lot of similarities with symphonic metal bands and how they sound, but there are also a lot of really fantastic albums. And I tend to really enjoy symphonic power metal a lot, and symphonic gothic kind of metal. You know, the gothic sound in symphonic is something I particularly love. Those early 2000s albums that seem to just appeal to me a lot for whatever reason. Um, so yeah, I'm getting to like this. I think there's symphonic metal coming out now as well that's quite exciting. I do think though that it can be, you can find a lot of sameness. I do think that there is some you know, element of that people are always going to comment on. But I think it does have its appeal, and I have found so many hidden treasures in this subgenre since, you know, I did ranking of symphonic metal albums, just all the top 10 by the genre. So I'm really digging symphonic metal. I think it's going to go into A tier at the moment, just based on how I am with it at the moment. I'm really loving it. I don't think it's quite S tier. I haven't loved it for a long, long time. But I'm growing to like it more and more as each day goes by. Now, black metal for me, I've never really truly gotten into black metal. I think this is going to go into D tier actually. There are classic black metal albums I actually do enjoy, but it seems to be something that I'll get into for a bit and then I'll come out of again. I'm very sort of find myself wanting to get into it more, but finding it difficult to find the motivation at the moment too. I appreciate it's a popular metal subgenre. I specifically like progressive black metal, rather like with death metal, but just pure black metal, I tend not to visit it very much. That said, I have probably done a fair share of black metal album reviews on the channel, so that maybe seems a little bit contradictory, but I don't actually dig black metal that much. I've got to be honest. So now Atmo black metal, that's a bit different because I often find the atmospheric versions that mix in shoegaze, that mix in melodic elements or just ambient stuff as well, because I'm a sucker for all that kind of thing. I really dig a lot of atmospheric black metal bands. Again, I think you can fall into the trap of finding bands that do sound very samey. But I think I'm going to put this into B tier. I think I actually really like a lot of atmospheric black metal stuff. I tend to find a lot of bands that sound very similar at the moment in this subgenre, but I think there are also the likes of, Alce and things like that. They're kind of Atmo black that I really enjoy. So yeah, going to stick that in B tier. Slam metal, I don't really know this very well at all. I'm just going to put it into E. I mean, it's a bit disrespectful in a way to just something you don't really know to put it in low tier, but it's just because I don't really know it. But yeah, slam metal, I don't really know it very well. I think actually maybe I do quite like it if it is what I'm thinking of the bands I'm thinking I like in slam. But yeah, it's going to be an E for now. Brutal Death is again not one that I really like that much. In fact, we're talking brutal death metal. It's C or D for me. Maybe I'll put it in C because there are some brutal death metal bands I do actually really quite like. But again, it's the kind of that sound, that sort of really brutal, relentless sounds that I like. I love it for like 15, 20 minutes, but if I'm listening to it for a long time, it kind of wears me out a bit. So yeah, that's where I'm at with brutal death metal. Folk metal, this is pretty undiscovered for me, to be honest. I don't know that many folk metal bands, he says. Maybe I do know more than I realise, but I don't really know it particularly well. So I'm going to put folk metal into D tier. I think at times too many of the folk instruments and the metal all coming together can sound a bit messy and a little bit convoluted in its output of sound, so that you've got just your senses are just overwhelmed by so many different instruments. I think folk metal can be like that sometimes and a bit much to digest, or to, you find it hard to find the sort of the specific hooks that you enjoy in the music. But still not bad. I kind of dig it sometimes, other times not so much. Metalcore. I have a fascinating relationship with metalcore in that there were a lot of metalcore bands that I grew up with. So somewhat in my sort of late teens, early 20s that I thoroughly enjoyed. And I suppose it's a little bit like thrash in some ways, in that I don't go back to metalcore that much now. So anyway, let's put it into. Let's put it into B tier. That's actually higher than I thought. Metalcore above some of these other ones is quite almost a bit controversial, but I think it's had a real impact on me over the years, which makes me want to put it a little bit higher up. And I do like quite a few metalcore bands, so yeah, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense. Deathcore, I'm going to put that into E. I really struggle with deathcore. I do think there are some really great deathcore bands though. but it tends to be not something that I go to a huge amount. I think it's got this sort of, those really deep gutturals and that just those huge breakdowns just over and over again tend to just not keep me very interested in the music. And I tend to find songwriting in deathcore is kind of secondary to everything else. So with a lot of deathcore I've listened to anyway. So yeah, it's not really so much for me, deathcore. Melodic death metal. Well, how many of these bands do I love? It has to be S tier. Melodic death metal. Um, you know, In Flames, Dark Tranquillity, Edge of Sanity, all those Swedish bands from this scene, Soilwork. Um, and then you've got sort of a lot of great Finnish bands, Children of Bodom and Insomnium. The beautiful forms of melodic death are out there as well that incorporate more cleaner passages and intersperse those with the heavy melodic death metal parts. I think it's a great subgenre. I love it because you have the aggressiveness of death metal, but you have the beauty of melody, and the two working together is a genius. It's like a great marriage for me of styles because you get the best of both worlds, and you can groove to it. You can also feel sad to it. You can also, you know, feel happy listening to it as well. It gets lots of different emotions across me, melodic death metal. So that's why I think I love it so much. Groove metal. I think I loved groove metal in the early 2000s, but now a little bit less. I'm going to put it into C tier because it does have that sort of legacy thing with me where I used to I used to really enjoy stuff like Pantera and Machine Head, but now not so much. So yeah, I'll put it in C tier. Lamb of God actually are a good band, but again, I'm not sure I can boost this any higher than C right now with how I feel about it now. Doom metal, I do love a bit of doom. It makes maybe I'm a sad boy, right? I do love a bit of melancholy in my music. I suppose that's more certain kinds of doom. Most doom is doom and gloom, but you do have epic doom bands that are a little bit more up tempo. It's generally slow. Um, I love doom metal. I think I could almost put it into S tier. Thinking about it now, I do love doom metal, perhaps more than heavy symphonic and prog. Yeah, doom metal does feature quite a bit in my year-end lists. I think. I think maybe it's S or A tier. I'll put it into S tier. Alternative metal. Now that can be so many different things to me. Alternative metal it's one of those subgenres that I suppose Deftones come to mind straight away with alternative metal and that sort of thing because they have that alternative. Um, you know, there's a lot of things they do that you could say are alternative. Um, uh, yeah, I like a lot of alternative metal. I think it's B tier. I think it's B tier. Right, let's get through these last few. So neoclassical metal. Um, yeah, to be honest, I think it's something about neoclassical metal puts me off. It feels a bit like tech death, whereas a lot about it can be about flair and skill. But I don't find much about neoclassical metal bands or just neoclassical styles that particularly draw me in, although they can show an abundance of talent with the guitar players and the instrumentalists and so on and so forth, but not so much for me, to be honest. Grindcore might be the first to go into F tier. I just can't get into grindcore. I've really tried. Again, there's one or two exceptions to that I think that I can think of, but it's probably one of my least favorites. So maybe it makes sense to put it into F tier on that basis. It is one of my least favorite, I would say, subgenres. Power violence, I don't even really know what that is. To be honest, what's power violence? I'm going to be torn apart in the comments by power violence fans, but never mind. There are worse things that could happen. So stoner metal. Um, I think I said recently in a video that stoner stuff and sludgy stuff is stuff that I dip in and out of. And if I dip into it, I really get into it. But if I'm not listening to it much, then I'm out of it for quite a long time and not really listening to it. So it's very inconsistent. I've put it in D tier for that reason. I suppose actually perhaps it would be fairer to put it into C, but D tier is a bit like, not many in there. So yeah, I don't feel strongly about it, put it that way. Although yeah, stoner, it depends. If you veer more towards sludgy death metal, I really like that kind of stuff. But just stoner on its own, not so much for me. And speed metal. Now, I do like a lot of speed metal. It kind of thrash and speed are the sort of siblings, aren't they? So I'm going to put it into B tier. So there we have it. So no shoegaze here because I suppose shoegaze isn't particularly metal, but it gets used with a lot of subgenres. Shoegaze would probably be S tier if I could have it on here for those of you that watch me for shoegaze reviews or dream pop reviews. Those would be an S tier for me. You know, I'm a sucker for shoegaze and dream pop. But anyway, going back to the subgenres of metal that are here. Prog metal, melodic death metal, and I've chosen to put doom metal S tier as well. And then you've got heavy metal, progressive death metal, and symphonic metal, which symphonic metal, as I say, has grown on me a lot lately. Thrash metal is in B tier, tech death, atmo, black, metalcore, alternative metal, and speed metal in B tier. C tier, we've got death metal, power metal, brutal death metal, and groove metal. D tier, black metal, a bit low there for a lot of people, I'm sure. Folk metal and stoner metal. E, we've got slam metal, which I don't really listen to much at all and don't particularly know really what it is, to be truthful. Deathcore, neoclassical, and power violence. I don't really know what that is, so that's why it's low down, not for any other reason, to be fair to it. And then grindcore, I don't particularly enjoy, so that's in the bottom tier there. So that's it. That's it. Maybe this met my expectations in some ways. But yeah, let me know what your favorite subgenres are, how you rate these ones particularly. Maybe you also want to do the same tier list. Feel free to do that on Tier Maker. And yeah, otherwise, hope you enjoy the video and don't forget to drop a like and a sub. Until next time, from me, it's bye for now.